Hey everybody, welcome to a video here, an upload that has been week overdue because I got sick last week, and a video in general overdue for months, but life is busy. But I did attend Portland Regionals a couple weeks ago from the time of uploading this, and I wanted to share the team with y'all, because it's a simple thing to do for me. So anyways, the 6 Pokemon are on screen here, and we'll get into more details about them. But first, let's talk about kind of the concept I was going for. First and foremost, beat the Palafren's core, as I was calling it, thanks to my friend Steven coming up with that, because I like that a lot. Which, you know, consists of the Palafin, obviously, but Amoonguss, Arcanine usually, and then you'd have Tinglu, Fluttermane, and then either Baxcalibur or Roaring Moon. That's kind of was the big team going around at the time. So I wanted to have a good matchup against that, and first and foremost, I did not want to play that mirror. I come to find I don't have the mental energy anymore to play those long drawn out games, because that's what that kind of would reduce to often. So with the team, the first concept after establishing the Palafrens and mirror stuff was offense, early and often. I wanted flow, like I wanted the game to flow at a really good pace for me to be able to just not have to exert too much mental energy, but to more just establish momentum, or establish the pace, control the pace, and then maintain that. So maintain that momentum that I've created based on the pace of play and yada yada yada. That was kind of the first thing. Another concept was I wanted to block strong priority moves because the meta had a lot of priority going around, and Farigiraf is beautiful at that, and it's also an offensive Pokemon, so Farigiraf became very much the heart of this team, especially against some of these more common things with the lot of priority. And I had a lot of Pokemon that could be victimized by some of the common priority moves. And then the other concept was, this is kind of what we were talking about with my friends that were preparing for this tournament. We really liked the idea of Corviknight. We felt like it had a good place in the meta, and so we wanted to build a team that could position Corviknight to kind of just set up and wall out a lot of the meta. The current meta was able to wall out a lot. Sometimes I had Corviknight win 1v3s. I've even won 2v4s with Corviknight. Well, it's pretty crazy what it can do. It can just be positioned into a winning and just run away with the game. So that was primary concepts. Let's get into the Pokemon, the really interesting stuff. Okay, so let's start off with, let's just get it out of the way. Fluttermane on lots of teams right now. I am no different. I'm using it. There's not a lot of fairy types worth using. There's really not any fairy types worth using in my opinion, other than Fluttermane. And fairy is just always a good offensive type to have. So this Fluttermane was built to be slower and bulky, which has kind of become a common trend now with Fluttermane, and I thought mine was one of the slower ends, but among bulky Fluttermanes, mine was actually outspeeding, which is crazy. So I chose Booster Energy because I want the damage boost. I didn't want to run Life Orb or Specs, so I rolled Booster Energy, which has the negative effect of once you switch out, you lose that boost. But I found myself not always switching it out very often. I'd either lead it and just keep it in there, or keep it in the back for the late game anyways. Terra type I chose was Steel, and that was mainly to help against other Fluttermane, as well as, resist those strong Steel type moves coming my way, or some of the stronger physical moves. This Terra Steel is just really good to let Fluttermane kind of sit on the field longer when it needed to. And that was the goal, sit on the field and just fire off high damage attacks. So I rolled the Modest Nature so I get the special attack boost with Booster Energy, not the speed boost. So this one specifically gets special attack boost. Sit there and do the damage, because Moonblast is really strong with that. And so Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Dazzling Gleam for spread, pretty basic. If there's any changes I'd make with this set, I would highly consider Terra Fairies still, because sometimes just wanted that extra damage output, especially from Dazzling Gleam. So between the Booster Energy and Terra Fairy, it could be really strong. And on that note, Specs is very much worth considering. I don't typically like choice items, but Flutter Mane does it really well. So that's Flutter Mane. Next up is Garchomp. This was the team's fire type, because this thing was Tera typing, or I was Tera-ing this a lot. But it's really basic, max speed, max attack, jolly. The main reason I'm running Garchomp is to outspeed Chi-Yu. I wanted to outspeed Chi-Yu, and I feel really good about Garchomp in this format. There's still a lot of Great Tusk, but I just didn't feel good about the speed. I didn't want to Scarf it, so Garchomp was my solution, and I think Garchomp performed really well, especially with the Clear Amulet, so I can't get intimidated. Can't get Icy Winded, which is kind of neat, even though, especially after you Terra Fire, then you're resisting it. Terra Fire, so I can't get burned, so resist Fairy. I felt pretty forced to run Tera Blast, because like I said, this team, Garchomp's the fire type, so I needed to hit like bulky steals that were immune to ground. So Tera Blast felt pretty necessary, but it was also nice for like all the Amoonguss around, and I found Garchomp's Tera chain would be tearing so much that it was totally justified. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Garchomp I have no issues with. I really like this set. I think it worked for the team really well. And it synergized with a lot of things really well. So probably the only downside to this is it really wanted the Tera most of the time. So that could be sticky, but it's solid Pokemon, good speed stat in this meta. Highly recommend. Alright, this was the glue of the team. The reason I was willing to run the Flutter Mane I did, which was bulky, slow, booster energy, special attack booster energy set, because I had this thing, Talonflame. If you guys haven't tried this bulky Talonflame out at all, I highly recommend it. It is, like I said, this thing is like the glue of the team. You have Will-O-Wisp support for all those physical attackers out there, which Flutter Mane very much appreciates. Tailwind support, Garchomp, Flutter Mane, since their whole idea is for them to come in and just put on offense, it helps to have that Tailwind support. This thing shuts down Amoonguss. It has, because of Taunt, obviously, to taunt it. Brave Bird hits it super effective. Safety Goggles to avoid Spore and Rage Powder, I ended up with Safety Goggles because I needed Talonflame to just sit there and burn stuff, because there was a lot of stuff to burn in this meta right now. And then the bulk allows it to live a Choice Band E-Speed from Dragonite, unless Chien Pao's on the field. But you always had Terra Ghost if you really needed it. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about Talonflame. Like, I think it's been my favorite Pokemon both this series and Series 2. Yeah, it's been so fun to use, and I really love it. So, but yeah, it just works so well with Garchomp and Flutter Mane, and we'll get to that when I get to the leads. Next up, Farigiraf, and like I said, I wanted to be blocking priority, so Farigiraf was the choice, especially since, again, Amoonguss is so common that I love to have multiple ways to deal with it. So between like Tera Blast with Tera Fire Garchomp, Talonflame with Taunt, Safety Goggles, Brave Bird, this thing was also really instrumental for dealing with Amoonguss because of its Psychic type attack. So, yeah, really good Pokemon at blocking the priority as well as still putting on offensive pressure, because it gets Spread, Stab, Hyper Voice, plus then the Throat Spray boost. It could actually throw in pretty decent damage. It could, with the current speed tier, it was able to outspeed a lot of things under Tailwind, which is really nice. It also had Trick Room for any like clutch or very situational Trick Rooms that could like win games. I didn't actually press Trick Room, I think, at the tournament, but my friend Nick, who used the same team, pressed Trick Room a lot. So very situational, but really useful. Terra Fairy just to resist any dark type moves if it needed. Never terrored it, but it was there. I remember I changed the spread last minute, so this spread is meant to OHKO the standard Amoonguss right now, which is more physically defensive, but one that has a little special bulk. So this will OHKO with Psychic at +1 or with a Helping Hand boost. That was what we went for there. And then the HP stats they're like 2 points higher than Annihilate's max HP in case of a Final Gambit. That was another thing about Farigiraf. It helped a lot against Annihilate BS, since it's immune to Ghost. I didn't run into a single Annihilate, but it was there for that if it needed. So, but yeah, I think it's really all-around solid mod. Blocks a lot of the priority that there is right now, and it just sits there and can just fire off damage. So sometimes I wish it was bulkier. Like, I wish I could have Throat Spray and Citrus Berry, but can't have everything. Okay, next up was the other sort of central piece to the team, Corviknight. We really like the idea of Garchomp Corviknight because I think it's still true. Corviknight has a really good place in the meta. My only gripe with it was it definitely was harder to set up than I expected. I was thinking it could sit on the field and set up a lot easier, but there were a lot of tools that prevented that. And then also, once people kind of like know about Corviknight, they know just to like really go after it. So, but having Mirror Armor is such a nice perk to this Pokemon. So I really like Corviknight, but I don't feel so committed to it like I am something like Farigiraf and Talonflame. Like, those two together are my favorite thing right now. So, but anyways, but that said, this thing could totally, once it does set up on certain targets, it just runs away. Like, it's unkillable. And you're boosting your Brave Bird and Body Press damage with Bulk Up, which is really nice. This one, I believe it O-code Amoonguss at +1 with Brave Bird. Maybe +2. Honestly, I don't remember. I know +1 Brave Bird would kill like 4 HP Flutter main, so I ended up opting for Leftovers for the passive recovery. I tried a Lumberry set as well, but ended up with Leftovers because it came more into play. But Lumberry is really nice in some situations. You just can't control when those situations happen. Opted for Tera Water. Tera Water is probably like objective, like if like all things even, Tera Water is probably the best Tera type right now because Water is so good defensively because there's not a lot of grass and electric moves out there right now. It's just like, thank goodness Soak Shouldn't just not a thing right now. So even though I was retaining the electric weakness, like, I didn't really care because I like having the fire resist, which made this thing really good into Chi-Yu if it needed to come against Chi-Yu teams. But then it also just, like, once you Tera Water, you kind of just shut down Palafin, Arcanine, for sure. And then Amoonguss with Brave Bird, it's a little bit more doable. The biggest knockback is getting burned, which is why Lumberry was the other consideration for this Pokemon. The Lumberry set was slightly different spread, but this, yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this Corviknight set. There are times where it'd be nice to have Tailwind, but it's hard to run Tailwind and give up Roost or something like that. But yeah, this Pokemon can be really clutch in certain matchups and situations. The hard part was there's never, when you play it, when you come against a team that can be good against, it's sometimes like it's only good depending on what 4 they bring. That's kind of the weird thing about it. Like, there's times where I was like, oh, this would be really good if they bring these things, or oh, this is not as good if they bring the other things. And so you kind of had that required kind of knowing how your opponent was playing and whatnot. So that, I think that's the only thing is with like the team preview choices can make it a little tricky. This last slot was a late change. This was originally Chien-Pao, but as the team developed, Chien-Pao kind of just really fell out of favor because it just felt out of place on the team. Since it was so last minute, we ended up with this Gyarados, because Gyarados is just a solid Mon. It kind of added a little bit of what I would have really wanted to have added to this team, which was a true Water Resist that didn't require Terra, and a little bit more control of the game, specifically like Thunder Wave speed control, Intimidate, obviously, to control some damage. And I couldn't really figure out a spread, so at the end I ended up with this kind of just spread I slapped together of like there was a few like specific outs, like I think involving Specs Flutter main, but and the stupid Surf Dome Dozo, I really hated that. So this is I wanted to make sure I was threatening Baxcalibur, so that's where Terra Steel Iron Head came in. That was kind of the main idea to that. Citrus Berry for recovery, and that helped with a lot of calcs. Thunder Wave, again, like I said, control. I just wanted to like control speed and such. Helping Hand was very late addition. I was running Taunt, but I tried Helping Hand instead, because since I already had Talonflame with Taunt, I did appreciate Helping Hand at times, but there were other moments where Taunt would be nice. So you can go either way. It's pretty situational, but yeah. So Gyarados meant to be really bulky. I would consider trying maybe a more offensive Gyarados, or maybe this would be better if I changed Corviknight or something to something else. So, but actually, I was pretty satisfied with Gyarados. It has a pretty good matchup against Ting-Lu with the Steel and the Iron Head. Helped against more Flutter Mane and even Excalibur. So, Intimidate support's always great. So, definitely glad I took Gyarados over Chien-Pao, but there were a couple options I was floating around with this slot, but ultimately ended up with Gyarados. And of course, having the ground immunity was great for Garchomp. So, yeah, so that's the team. Let me talk about the tournament just a bit. So it was in May 6, 2023. That was day 1 at the Portland Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. My main goal, prove to myself I'm not completely washed as a player. I've played a lot in the past. I've done really well. Then I stopped playing a lot. Now I'm kind of like playing a little more in tournaments. And San Diego went horrible. So this one I did a lot better by I took care of my body, drank water, snacked, ate well. So yeah, so we had about 500-ish masters. And I finished 6-3, which was 99th place overall. So I was pretty satisfied. And the team functioned exactly how I built it to function, and that felt really good. I wish I had more practice with the team. I didn't make enough time to practice, and I probably would have nailed down that like Gyarados slot, or maybe I would have not used Corviknight. But so I ended up missing day 2, the day 2 cut in the last round. So I was 6-2 going to the final round, and then ended up losing. But overall, very satisfied and very satisfied with the team. I think this is a team that if I was more tournaments to go to, I would be spending a lot more. I would highly consider spending a lot more time fine tuning this team into something that would be more successful than the success that this team felt like it had for me. So let's talk about leads. So there's 2 leads. Like if you're just sitting there like I don't know what to do, especially in a best of 3 where you kind of got to feel out your opponent for the first game. Garchomp Talonflame, Flutter Mane Talonflame. Those are your go-to leads. Like, you're usually not going to lead... Like Talonflame, you're leading 90% of the time. And it's usually with Garchomp or Flutter Mane. The idea is you have your strong spread moves or just strong attacking moves next to your control Pokemon. So Talonflame to help... Like you lead it and just start putting on offense while trying to dictate the pace of play or get early momentum and then maintain it. And that's what Talonflame was meant to do, is set the pace while Garchomp or Flutter Mane kind of start doing the damage, and the team becomes a very positional team. You start positioning into your end game, which so often if I led Garchomp Talonflame, I'd have Flutter Mane in the back to try and pick up the momentum and into the end game and carry that. And so a couple other leads, sometimes I would do Garchomp Gyarados. It's kind of a similar concept, but little less. It's a little more defensive because Gyarados is just a very defensive mon with Intimidate. I'd try and maybe throw out Thunder Wave, or if I'm really cheeky, I'm just gonna like Tera, Fire, Earthquake, Helping Hand, or Tera Blast, Helping Hand. Just go for like a big KO with Helping Hand. Yeah, it's used that a couple times. I found Flutter Mane Farigiraf to be a pretty good lead in certain situations, notably Perish Trap because I played against that. But yeah, it's just good spread special damage when you need special attackers. You could lead that. Threaten Trick Room if you really want to. And then Flutter Mane Gyarados can be a lead similar to Garchomp Gyarados, except Flutter obviously is special attacker and it appreciates the Intimidate support from Gyarados. So yeah, I would, but ultimately, like 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's Garchomp Talonflame or Flutter Mane Talonflame. So it kind of simplifies the play a little bit when you have pretty common leads, and that helps me a lot, especially with the whole mental energy aspect. So yeah, just Garchomp, Talonflame, Fluttermane, Talonflame, and then once you start understanding some other obscure matchups, then you can try other leads. But this was typically it right here. Okay, now to the bad parts. Not necessarily bad parts, but just challenges. Like, no team's perfect. Every team has challenges. And we were definitely taking advantage of kind of the current state of the meta. Number one, the lack of electric types. So, if you notice, this team, half of the team is weak to electric. So, guess what? Special attacking electric types, problematic. Like, even, like, Iron Hands wasn't too bad, because, like, it had so many ways to deal with physical attackers. It's special attacking electric types that could become brutal. Rotom Wash was one in particular I did not want to see, but the Pokemon's not very common in the current meta. So, yeah, if you run into those, really difficult to play around. Not necessarily unwinnable, but, you know, when half your team is weak to electric, can be pretty tough. So, yeah, so that's number one. We definitely found Iron Bundle to be more difficult than I would like. Primarily that fast freeze dry. Because once we made the switch to Gyarados, like, the Iron Bundle matchup became a lot harder. Because the Corviknight's not incredible against it, but it's also not awful. Yeah, it was weird. So often when I played Iron Bundle, the goal was to knock that thing. As soon as I saw that thing, my goal was just like aggressively get rid of it. Especially with something like Fluttermane and Farigiraf, which could do the most damage to it. So that was Iron Bundle is always a high priority when you see it. Dozo Tatsugiri, the infamous Sushi Duo. Against standard Dozo, you can handle it. It takes some really good maneuvering and planning. You have to really think things through. The Surf variant is just a nightmare. Gyarados really helps, but it's a nightmare. But it wasn't common enough that I was going to build my whole team to stop that. But it was scary enough that, like, I have to have an answer to this, because it's a team someone could totally bring. So, yeah, not... Usually, like, this matchup involves burning Dondozo or paralyzing it, and just, like, really trying to whittle it down with your Fluttermane. So it's not fun, but Dozo's not nearly as common as it was in Series 1, so I was okay. I didn't play a single Dozo team, so it worked out in my favor for the tournament specifically. Let's see, some other stuff. So, Moongus, Baxcalibur, Tinglu together. So, I mentioned how I wanted to beat the Palafin stuff. Well, there's the other part of it within that. This trio right here I found to be just mind-numbingly difficult sometimes because of just the sheer bulk. And not being able to burn Baxcalibur sucks. When I played when that was a Roaring Moon instead of Baxcalibur, I was like, great, burn that. Done. But this trio with Moongus... It sucks. You can shut down a Moongus, you can shut down everything but Pollen Puff. And when you have Tinglu there, which is unkillable sometimes, like, yeah, this just takes some really crafty maneuvering at times. And it comes down to a lot of really big reads. But if you can eliminate the Baxcalibur, you at least eliminate, like, the main offense, and typically also the Fluttermane with it. If you can get rid of the main the key I found to this is maintain the Pokemon advantage, because there's a very good chance you're going to time in this matchup. So if you get the Pokemon advantage, get rid of their offense, and then maintain that advantage as long as you can. Another one, bulky steel types with the ground immunity. So pretty much Corviknight and Orthworm. I did play an Orthworm, and I managed to win. I probably got lucky. I know I got lucky, because there was one turn where I just had to, like, make a really aggressive play, and it worked in my favor. So those can be tricky. And again, this is why Garchomp basically had to run Tera Blast for Tera Fire. So, yeah, that's worth pointing out. Like, Taunt is your best friend in against these two Pokemon in particular, because they're usually setup kind of Pokemon. So, and then, like, special attacks, so which is Shadow Ball from Fluttermane and Tera Fire, Tera Blast. And if they Tera type change, then, you know, deal with that as it happens. So, like, Terra Poison Orthworm, now I can at least Earthquake it. No, I can't. Sorry, that's dumb. I can Psychic it. And then I wanted to point this one out. It's not like really bad, but Flutter Mane with Thunderbolt, which is usually Specs Flutter Mane, because again, half the team's weak to Electric, so a well-positioned Specs Flutter Mane could be problematic. One of us ran into a non-Specs Thunderbolt Flutter Mane. That's a nightmare. Like, I don't want to deal with that. But fortunately, that's not very common. But if you come across that, like, that's a big rip, or can be. So that's some of the stuff. None of these challenges are like there's this. I don't think this team had any auto losses necessarily, but these are things that required some really careful and crafty maneuvering, especially how positional the team is. It plays very positionally. So, and just to throw out some things, some fun stuff to try out. Changing out Corviknight to try out Orthworm, or changing out to Corviknight to go with King Gambit, just to have something with more immediate offense and not really setup. Those are worth trying, just to try something fun or different with the team. Take the concept and try that. Gyarados into Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle was a huge consideration, like an Encore variant, where I would have put Booster Energy on Bundle and just put Specs or Life Orb on Flutter Mane. So that would have been a really good choice. Icy Wind support, Freeze Dry. You know, it actually helps a lot against Dozo, especially when you have Encore. So yeah, that was very much a consideration. So try those out if you'd like. Anyways, just want to say big thanks to my group of friends that we all kind of worked together on preparing for the tournament and kind of ended up with a team here. But yeah, Steven, Brody, Nick, Bridger, you guys are great. It was fun. So fun to do that and look forward to kind of playing some more and prepping for more eventual tournaments. So yeah, team effort. And that was my favorite thing about this whole experience, doing a team effort. So, alright, thanks for watching, and I will, catch me on Twitch every once in a while, and we'll see if I can get some other videos out in the future. Really would be good to do. So, take it easy, y'all, and enjoy the rest of Regulation C.